Recording.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy everyone is here. We have a small group, but it's a lovely one. And we have a new participant, but they're having some technical difficulties. I think it's Craig and Adrian. So we will wait and see if they can turn on their camera or anything soon, or if we can hear them. But otherwise, we'll just talk amongst the three of us. Also, my son Marco is out for now, and I asked him and his caregiver not to come in the middle, either get here before the meeting or after. So I don't think he'll be here, but he's been missing everyone and says hello. So this is August 8th. I'm going to say that since we've had some trouble on the recordings of showing everyone. Oops, it looks like we lost Craig. Okay, so anyway, we're going to start out with our introductions, and that's the name you want to be called here, your pronouns, and your and the icebreaker answer to the icebreaker question. So tonight, I'll give you a little scenario of why I came up with this. We've been having a lot of rain, and yet last night it started with wind, and there's a big 2-story house on the next lot over from me, and it's been vacant ever since I moved in here. So that's been well over a year, and they just started working on it. So I assume somebody's going to move in soon. Anyway, they've had roofers up there, and yesterday a ferocious wind came up, and I was just praying that they didn't get blown off. I was just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do if they get blown off? And then today, this gigantic deluge just started. It started raining really hard all of a sudden, and then it started lightning and thunder and everything. And I looked out, and they were still up there through the whole thing, trying to cover up any holes or anything, and just taking new things up there. And um so again, I was just praying for their safety. So my icebreaker question for you is, what is a job that you're really happy you don't have to do? And so I'm going to say roofing for right now. So I'm Carol, she, her, and uh, the job I wouldn't want to have is roofing. Krager, you want to go next?
Yes, I'm Craiger. Hi, Craig. Now we can see you.
Yay.
Um, God, you look so familiar. I feel like I know you. I
You
think I've been,
do.
yeah, we've been in a Zoom or something before. Um, my pronouns are he, they. And what is the job I don't want to do? Okay, so I spend up to 2 hours a day outside, either walking or biking. But I get to come back in the air conditioner into my house and go back to work, going back and forth. So I wouldn't like to have a job where I had to stay outside, 10 hours a day, no matter what the job was, roofing, or because it is brutally hot out right now in Austin, Texas. It was 101 today, and the heat index was 111.
Hmm.
So, and I see landscapers and people, and they're going at it all day long, and I'm like, God bless you. I see the roofers. We've had hailstorms, Carol. There's more roofers out here than anything else. And I'm like, I just can't even imagine how much water and G2 Gatorade and all that stuff they have to drink just to stay hydrated. So that's my story.
Okay. Thank you, Krager. How about Suzette next?
I'm Suzette, she, her, and I don't want to get too descriptive, but we live out in the country now, and we have well water and septic. And when they were
Well,
building our house, they had these little guys that they set the outhouses down and they service them and pick them up when the builders are through, um, with their services. But there was a couple of times where it got really windy out here and it blew the outhouse. I would not want to be the person that had to upright the outhouse and then deal with the
Oh my
after.
goodness, that's so true. That's so true. I hope this is making everyone
They
grateful for the
couldn't pay me enough.
jobs that they have had. So, okay, guys, what we do on our introductions is we just say the name that we want to be called, our pronouns, and the answer to the icebreaker question. And tonight's icebreaker is, what's a job you're definitely happy you don't have to do? Uh-oh, you're frozen. We might have to move on. Well, if you can hear us, we'll come back to you if you become unfrozen. So, okay, well, let's go ahead and start. This is kind of an addendum. We were gonna talk about this last week, neurodivergence. And this is coming on the tail from last, sorry, did we lose Suzette too? Okay, well, it still shows 4 participants, so hopefully we'll have pictures back in just a minute. Anyway, so we're talking about neurodivergence. July was Disability Pride Month. In June, we talked a lot about pride, and so coming on the tails of Disability Pride, we had one session talking primarily about mobility type disabilities. So tonight we're talking about neurodivergence. So first of all, let me give just a simple definition of neurodivergence. And that is that basically it's when someone's brain is wired differently than the norm. And the the most familiar types of neurodivergence are ADHD and autism. Some learning disabilities also fall in that category, but this does not include anything developmental, like the cognitive disabilities that my son has, for example. So anything that's developmental, like a developmental delay, is not included in the definition of neurodivergence. So, Kreger, what do you know people that are neurodivergent?
Wow. So ADD or ADHD,
Yes.
I think, there's a possibility that I have never been diagnosed with ADHD, like yourself, from what it was a year ago or something. So yeah, I don't know, but I can't say that I have people in my circle or no one at work has come out to me saying that they have any of these conditions. So yeah, I have to say, and I'm sure there must be somebody at church, there must be people at church, but again, no one has shared with me, personally that they have, this or that. So yeah, so that's my answer.
Yay, y'all are back.
There you are.
Can you hear us? Not yet. Okay. Well, we'll just keep talking about neurodivergence. And hello, can you hear us, Adrian and Craig?
Yep. Can you hear us?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Yes.
Now, would you like to do your introductions? Just name, pronouns, and answer to the icebreaker about a job you wouldn't want to have.
All right. You want to go first? No. All right. My name is Adrian Covarrubias, he, him. The job that I am grateful for the people that do have this job, but I know I wouldn't want to have this job is fast food workers. My
Oh,
mom used to work at a Jack in the Box, and she would just tell me of every little thing that would go in a day to day life. And now that I have graduated and I got my own job, I am feeling very thankful because these people are being like, they have to be there right on time. They cannot leave early. They can only take bathroom breaks at a certain amount of time. If they make a mistake, like they accidentally drop a patty on the floor, guess what? That might get deducted from your paycheck. And if you're already making a minimum wage, that is really sad. So I am thankful that I'm not do not have to deal with the stress of that. That in my job I can actually mess up and be okay. So I'm lucky and I'm privileged on that.
And Craig Puckett, he, him pronouns, or anything, I don't really care. And the job that I would not want to have is a job that I had before, which was retail. I worked for Target back in my, I think I was 18 or 19 for about a year. And I did that during the holiday season. I started before the holiday season, but I ran through the holiday season and would absolutely never want to do that again, especially working. I was working in the, I don't really have this any longer, but I was working in the little food area. I was supposed to be working in customer service returns, and that was actually fine. But then when I got sent to occasionally work in the little cafe area that they had there, I would be placing orders while like cooking things at the same time. And it was very hectic, and just smelling the giant like bags of like the, I don't know, the plastic containers of the popcorn butter just day after day after day, and getting that all over your hands and having your hands be like orange and slimy and covered in jellified popcorn grease was not pleasant. So I would like to never do that again.
Wow, that's a good one. Okay. Well, while y'all were trying to reconnect, we talked a little bit about the definition of neurodivergence. I'll just say real quick that neurodivergence, the two biggest categories that people are most familiar with are ADHD or ADD. I think I heard one person say that we're using the term ADHD more commonly now, but I've heard a lot of people still using ADD, so I don't know if that was really accurate or not. That wasn't from a professional. So anyway, so ADHD or autism. So those are the two most common. Certain types of learning disabilities are also included in that, but the thing is, you're kind of born with this. This is kind of more of a genetic that does not include developmental delays like what my son Marco has from cerebral palsy. It does not include things like that. This is just a way, because that's more of an insult to your brain, kind of like a stroke in the developmental years. Whereas your DNA is what leads to neurodivergence. And the statistics have been changing, I think, because in terms of how prevalent neurodivergence is, but it is still definitely a minority. Whereas neurotypical people, that's the opposite of neurodivergent, would be neurotypical. At least that's a term that most people are currently using. And so any questions about the definition? Okay. Okay, so I became I tried to learn some about autism back when I was in seminary, and I was just learning about inclusion and 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 how churches can respond to this. So I want y'all to be thinking about that a little bit as we talk about this. But I became much more familiar with neurodivergence about a little over a year ago when I was diagnosed with ADHD, and it's there seem to be a lot of, particularly women, with a late in life diagnosis, because some of the symptoms of ADHD seem to be more, or some of the ways that we mask tend to be more culturally acceptable in women than they are, or girls than they are in boys. So boys, young boys or young men are more likely to be recognized in school than women are. So anyway, it was a very eye-opening thing for me to be diagnosed with ADHD, and I didn't know that much about it. And when it was first suggested to me that I might have it, I was like, no, I don't. No, I don't, and I'm certainly not hyperactive. And now I look back and think of all the ways in my life that I am hyperactive, and even though I like, I'm having lots of problems with my feet now, and so I don't like to stand or walk or things like that a lot. But even when I'm in a lot of pain, I find that when I'm super stressed, like I can't sit down and write an email or something like that. I'm getting up and pacing, and I'm like, why am I pacing? My feet hurt already. I have to sit down. And but that's just, I think, one of the symptoms. And I just want to share with you guys one of the things that I realized. I mean, there's a lot of things that I was surprised about, like the like the way that my emotionality, my ups and my temper, my irritability, those kind of things are related to that, to ADHD. And things, there's something called rejection sensitivity disorder, which is common in most people with ADHD, which is just what it sounds like. We're just a little bit, whether it's a perceived or a real rejection, we just tend to react much more strongly than neurotypical people to even perceived rejection. And the thing that I tried a bunch of different medicines, and none of them really worked. I mean, one of them worked very well, but had a bad rebound effect for me, so I didn't continue taking it. But it gave me a big realization about what had been going on in my head my whole life, that is not typical, that other people that it was so nice when it was gone. And that was this little critic's voice in my head that doesn't just give me a hard time when I'm screwing up. I mean, it is there for every single thing I do, every sentence I speak, every decision I make, whether it's a big major one about what to do in a crisis, or whether it's just what am I going to wear today. Oh my gosh. Actually,
I
the
think it
crisis
helps.
the
I think it helps us not be self-deprecating and judgmental about ourselves, is to have some kind of a diagnosis, or to have, instead of a label, to have something that has more meaning to it than just what is, I'm annoyed, or I feel, rejected, or, I mean, if it's a pattern for you, um, having that discovery of, what could this be,
yeah,
has got to be
it
kind
was
of
huge.
helpful
Yeah, it
itself.
was huge. But a lot of people, I think, when they get diagnosed late in life, feel angry that they weren't diagnosed at a time when they could have done more about it. And they realize some of the challenges that they've had in their lives, like in school, especially things like that. that they feel like they could have overcome if they'd have known about it and been able to get some treatment. But for me, it was just a big relief. Yeah, and especially when I realized about that little voice just going, wait, do you really want to say that? Is there a better way to say it? You could use different words. You could address this a different way. You could, is that really what you meant? Are you sure? Are you positive? And, just I realized that voice was there for every single sentence I ever spoke. And so that was a real eye opener for me. Autism is kind of a different scenario, but sensory sensitivities are what are one of the features of autism that I think that there's some new technology coming out, like noise canceling headphones and things like that I think can benefit a lot of neurotypical people too. But I heard autism described as just being unable to turn off, to filter any of the sensory input coming in.
I had a client, she was she came to me when she was 19, and she needed public relations really fast because she got picked to do a TED Talk for TED Women. And it turned out she was autistic. She had Asperger's, and I learned her story. And as a child, she had been institutionalized several times because they didn't know what was wrong with her, and she had that problem with sensitivity. She wouldn't bathe. She wouldn't take a shower. She wouldn't, she didn't like to do things like that, and they thought it was mental health issues, and it was really just she had what's called not Asperger's, and she was also a savant. So in the interim, she spoke in front of the United Nations for she came up with some kind of a biological research that she was doing on coral reefs and how coral reefs regenerate and stuff like that. So she spoke to the United Nations, and she was asked to do this TED Talk. But in the interim, it was learning about the big, huge disconnect she had with society as a child and how she had to overcome that. And the difficulty she's had with dealing with that. So I helped her write her TED Talk, and I had to give her feedback on, what to say and what not to say, because some things that people say, made sense to her, but it didn't, it wasn't the right thing to say for, a wide audience. So
I think that's pretty typical for people with autism to maybe miss some social cues. And I think that's true for some people with ADHD. But for others of us, it's more like we're more sensitive. We're overly sensitive to social
I
cues.
would say, oh God, I have Asperger's. I know it.
Oh my God, they hate me. I can't, it's a, so that's more how I've experienced life and relationships, more like that. So I think what you said is a really good example of why, well, I mean, every single human being has value. You don't have to have a special talent or anything. It does sound like the example that you used, she did have a special talent, a special intelligence that really was able to bring some a piece to the puzzle of curing some of the ecological woes in our world. So, and I think that's not uncommon, and people with ADHD tend to have a more creative way of thinking than other people, and maybe creative bents, like artistic type bents, but even if we don't have anything of that looks like something of value to bring to the table, why do we want to? Why is inclusivity a value for us in our church, in our world? You know, I think for all of us as individuals on this call, and certainly in our church, that is a value that we have called out. That's one of our core values of our church, is inclusivity and diversity. So,
So
why
every
is that?
every human wants to feel like they matter. Every human wants to feel like they belong to something, and that they have some family that loves them. And I think that we can definitely raise the bar with that in how we talk about it and what we talk about online. And you know not we have deaf interpreters at church, so they do interpreting for those of hearing disabled at the church. And we had for a while live Spanish interpreting. Now we have a Spanish service, but that's just a small tip of the iceberg for what we could open our doors to and talk about. So I think this is a good place to start here. There's so many ways that we have elements of who we are that is different from the rest of the world. And how do we identify it? How do we quantify it? How do we manage it? Where do we go for love and acceptance? What does that look like? And so I would be interested in knowing what Craig and Adrian think about, inclusivity at our church, and maybe how we can open those doors a little wider. And does this conversation resonate with you?
Well, I want Adrian to speak first because I've heard myself. This is God Talk, and then I come every Thursday, so I want to hear what you have to say, Adrian.
Oh boy.
So I apologize if I can just, and I'm so sorry. We were having the worst time trying to join. We're trying to join from my work PC, and it was not having it. So now we're joining from a different computer. So this is our very first time joining, and for this particular session, we also joined in late. So a small, high-level intro to the course in this particular session, or the topic of the session, I think would be helpful for me, just to ground myself better with the conversation that we're having
Excellent.
right now.
Thank you so much for asking that. Thank you so much. Yeah, God Talk is just it's a discussion group, number one. And the long name of it is Conversations about Faith, Society, and Self-Love with LGBTQ plus Christians. And the one of our it's a discussion group, not a class, so we're not here to particularly learn. We're not here. I mean, it's nice if we put out ideas like Suzette was talking about for what can we do as a church. But our main point is just to talk, and specifically to talk about God. It's about theology, and theology as a definition means how we think and talk about what divine presence is, or however you call it. Whether I tend to use the word God, but lots of people have other different names. Higher power, different definitions of kind of what that means. But a lot of us, particularly in the queer community, have been hurt by ideas about God that and about religion, and that's all based, I think, in the idea of who God is. In other words, if you think God is such a cruel taskmaster that that you have to believe a very specific thing, or you have to act, you have to, just walk on eggshells your entire life and avoid specific types of behavior, or you're going to go to hell, or you have to belong to a certain group, you have to be a certain way, or you're not lovable, or you're not loved by God, then that speaks to a very cruel and punishing God. And we want to try to heal those kind of hurts that religion has imposed on us by talking about who God is in these kind of situations. So we've talked about a lot of things through the time that we've had this. As I don't know if you were online when I was talking about how we got to this particular topic. We in June we talked, since that was Pride Month, we talked about what does Pride mean. We talked, we had one session just on queer theology, and that was a very interesting one. We've talked about different, we've talked about, I think polyamory was probably the one where we had the most, people were like, we don't want to talk about this.
I think it's also got some therapeutic aspects to it, because a lot of us don't really get to express how we feel about things, and what things mean to us and how they affect us. And this is a great open forum for bringing things like that out that you might have, under the surface of who you are, and how we can work together as a family of people to support you and to love you and to lift you up in times where you need that. And I don't think there's enough of that. And so we're trying to open the doors to just having a great conversation. And I'm telling you, we've been doing this for about a year and a half now. And the conversations
Not
are
quite.
priceless.
I think we started last October.
Not quite, maybe a year.
About a year.
Okay. But anyway, these are actually recorded for replay. So we have a YouTube channel that has all the God Talks on it. So you could go back and listen to some of them. But we've had just amazing conversations, and
I want to be able to share that. And a lot of people can't come. We talked early on about the pluses and minuses of recording, and we want to keep this a safe space as much as possible, but we also wanted to be able to share. So if somebody ever wants to come on and remain anonymous, we can, they can not turn their camera on, they can give us an alias, whatever they want to do. But we haven't had anybody so far that wanted to do that. So I apologize for not explaining that at the beginning. I should have tried to do that with.
It's a safe space too.
Oh yeah, so we were frozen. We had issues, so that is not a problem at all.
Now,
I appreciate the intro. We didn't catch how this particular session kind of moved into the topic of like neurodivergence specifically.
That's just the topic that was chosen for tonight, and
okay.
in July so June was Pride Month, and so that's why we focused on that, and then July was Disability Pride Month, and so we talked some at one session about particularly mobility disabilities, and we because disability is too big a topic to talk about that all in 1 hour. And so I explained that back at that session that neurodivergence is something that really I learned a lot more about last year when I was diagnosed, and so I just wanted to talk about that at some point. And so we were going to talk about it last week, which was my birthday. and
Happy birthday!
I'm born that way. This is a good time to talk about it. But we the whole thing about there were just too many current topics, and I got real animated, and so we kind of had a choice, and we put this topic off till tonight. So that's kind of how that happened. And there was one other thing I was going to say, but I'll give you a chance to respond first, and then hopefully I'll think about what else I was going to add.
Any
So the original question was how diversity inclusivity at a church and what we think about it or what we have
Yeah.
been seeing. Right?
like anything we can do to like help or
Well, let me just ask,
Open.
how long have y'all been at the church, and did you feel welcome when you came in?
Yes. We've been going to the church now for in person 2 years or so, right?
approximately, yeah.
Yeah. So, and been plugging ourselves in bit by bit as well and trying to be more active here and there. I know Craig has been way more active. Um, what, one thing that I would say, and this is just my personal experience as well, sometimes groups, we all get in there. Once we start going in there, everybody's like, okay, everybody come in and start. We're doing this, 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 this. And as a new member, sometimes they're lost. They want to join in and they might actually show up, but they have no idea where to go, who to talk to. Do they just sit down and just, okay, I'm here? Or, sometimes it feels like that. I and I'm a very shy person. I started joining the choir. I started doing rehearsals with them, and sometimes I kind of show up and I'm like, oh, I'm late like 15 minutes. So I just kind of like sit down until somebody says like, oh, hey, come on. It's like blah blah, and or like, oh, you're supposed to be over in this side as well. And so now that I've gotten a couple under my belt, I feel more like, okay, I know what to do, I know where to go, or a bit, but I'm still trying to figure it out. And I think that might be an issue with all groups because I've seen that even like when I did when I was doing like a barbershop choir, I went to some rehearsals like here in Houston, and yeah, they had like a opening for new members to come and join them for the choir, but then there was really no follow-up. There was no like, hey, do you like this one, let's follow up. Do you want to audition? Do you want to become a full member, not a full member? Maybe there's something else that this might not be your cup of tea, but maybe we can find something else for you. And so and I get it. Sometimes our groups are like, hey, we only have like an hour and a half to do this. Boom, 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 boom. And whenever that new person kind of wants to join, I know again my personal experience. Sometimes I'm like, well, I'll just stay here and okay, bye, and that's it.
Another thing
I
about
would
God
say
Talk,
from my perspective, I very much agree with Adrian because my experience was kind of similar. And I will say, so I came from the Austin MCC and was very involved there for a number of years. I started going back in 2014, I want to say 2014. And at the Austin church, I will say that they were very in your face in, I think, a good way. So it was their welcoming committee, I guess you would call it, was kind of set up to like have like a radar for new folks who may be coming in. And they were constantly present in the Sunday services. So they would become extremely familiar with who was a regular, who was an occasional presence. and who was somebody new. And if they saw somebody new, they were very like, I'm gonna like greet you, I'm gonna say hi, I'm gonna introduce myself, I'm gonna ask you if you're new, I'm going to kind of like usher you very carefully along. And it ultimately, obviously, it's your decision if you come back or not. But it was very much I'm going to welcome you. I'm going to ask you like why you're here, what you're looking for. You're just checking things out and to get a feel for you personally. And then I'll leave you to it. And at the end of service, I'll say, hey, thanks for joining us. We'd love to have you back again if you're interested. Please come back and see us next weekend. And if that person comes back, then maybe that's a time to again greet them again and introduce the topic of like involvement within the church, or to give them a heads up on like, oh, here's a pamphlet that we have. If you're ever interested in joining a different class or a Bible study or the choir or something like that you might be interested in, and just take it and take a look at it, at your leisure. And if that person continues to come and doesn't get involved with something, then, again, some gentle prodding. But they were very much like, I'm going to handhold and like usher you along and get to know you a little bit more and understand your strengths and where you might fit in best at the church. So I think that was something that the Austin church for me really excelled at. And I'm not saying that the Houston church is unfriendly. I just think that the Austin folks really like were just there, like they were on you, like, but not in a, I have to emphasize, not in a bad way, not in the you're at Macy's and I'm a salesperson, I'm going to try to sell you something, it wasn't like that. It was truly welcoming and very inclusive, but also with enough breathing room to not scare you off at the same time. Yeah.
So yeah, I think the main thing that I would like to be is like, it's the follow-up for new members. And then if new people are coming in, is make it very aware, like, hey, I see you're new, I see you're this, come, I'm gonna tag with you, or if you want to join in these classes, I'll be your buddy for the day.
Oh,
You
nice.
know?
That's a good idea. I like that. Craig,
So Craig, I have to ask, when did you go to Houston?
It was November of 2019, so just before the pandemic. And
Okay.
at the beginning of that year, I volunteered to start helping out with communion, and I helped out with literally one service the weekend before everything shut down. And then we went online for a couple of years, and it was only until like kind of like maybe the back part of last year, I think.
It was like 2023, like February, March of 2023.
I had to ask, I'm from Resurrection MCC, but now my husband and I, we moved to Austin in 2020, right during the pandemic. And as soon as Uprising opened their doors in May of 2021, I was involved, I've always been involved in the music ministry and playing drums and whatnot. So I'm thinking how funny it is that we kind of just changed churches. Like you're where I was. And but you're right, it's a, and Austin, it's a very friendly community, but there's a lot of young people and a lot of parents with kids at Uprising too. So it's a kind of a different vibe, but I understand. And another thing about GodTalk is that, like, Carol, for example, is sitting in Taos, New Mexico. So GodTalk was kind of developed for our online community, because I still want to be deeply in touch with Houston. I love Houston. I love the people at Resurrection. I was there for, playing drums and singing and ministering for well over a decade, like, I don't know, 14 years. And now I'm in Austin, but I'm still deeply connected to the Houston community. So GodTalk is for a place where anybody can join. We have over 400 members of our online Resurrection Church. And so this is a place where anyone can come. And
yes,
so now I recognize you, because I've seen Craig reading scripture, because I come home from Uprising and I watch Resurrection, and I've seen Adrian singing with choir. And I was like, oh,
Yep.
they got a new guy. They got a new guy on board.
That's it. You got it.
Nice. Well,
And you
welcome.
guys are young. You're young and useful, and we need more
Yeah.
What are
diversity
you
in
saying?
that
Us old
respect.
people are not useful? Is that what you're saying, Suzette?
No, but Adrian and Craig would be the future of the church, you know?
Yeah.
But
How do we
I wanna-
sustain us? How do we
okay,
keep it
let's
going?
get back to our topic for tonight a little bit, because we're running out of the time. And I know Suzette is always interested in how do we what do we do in the church to help sustain, and so we can continue this conversation. That's a very important topic for sure. I just want to point out a couple of things about neurodivergence, and the intersection with queerness. And Adrian, I really liked the way that you described just where do I go and what do I do next, and kind of that sort of thing. And I think I have felt like that almost everywhere I go my whole life. And so I've kind of been wondering lately if some of that was related to ADHD, or maybe it's just me. I'm a pretty extroverted person, but I was pretty shy when I was growing up. I'm not so shy anymore. And having a son who's the biggest extrovert in the whole world, and also pretty charming, kind of kids helps keep me connected, so I can overcome some of that in some ways. But I think one of the things that we may not have much time to delve into anymore, but with neurodivergence and with queerness, there's a possibility of masking a lot. And I mean, it's easier for some of us to mask than others, both in both categories, in terms of like in terms of how we present in our genders, in terms of if we're in a relationship, and if we I mean, I've been single long enough where I notice a big difference. I don't have to say, anything about a relationship or pronouns or anything like that. So it's pretty easy for me to mask if I don't want to disclose my queerness. And I never talked much about ADHD at work because I felt like my boss already hated me. So why bring in one more thing that they could hassle me about? So, so I didn't, I guess I've masked well enough my whole life with that I didn't even get diagnosed, um, for so long. So anyway, what do you, does that bring up anything for anyone in terms of relating to
So
people who are neurodivergent?
what did you do to get diagnosed? Because I think that may be a disconnect for people. Like, I think I might be, and I think people are more curious now because it's more prevalent and it's talked about more online. So,
Yes, it's, yes.
like if I were to explore this, what would be the first step be, and how does that affect me with my relationships, and how does neurodiversity affect relationships, and maybe that's part of what's going on with me, and that kind of.
Well, that's a very good question. Yeah. So for me, it was a therapist who recognized that in me, a kind of a good mirror, because she had ADHD too, and I was really blessed to find this good therapist that I could relate to so well. And so she's the first one who mentioned it, and then we started talking about it more, and I started becoming more convinced that that was probably the case. And so I went to my primary care and said, hey, what do you think? And she's like, oh, I know a guy in town who does all the testing, and apparently there's only one or two people in town who will do that, but this is a small town. Houston, I'm sure, has tons. But yeah, it's a series of tests. I had to go in like twice for a kind of a, I don't remember how long, but it seemed like a long time, like hours, and do these different tests. And the guy who was given the test actually said, "Oh, I don't think you have it. I don't think you have it." And then he started looking at the test and he's like, "Oh, wow, this is really clear." Um, and um, and so anyway, that's how it worked. But I went to my primary care to find out about how to get the diagnosis. Okay, we're running a little bit over, so Marco, Marco was wanting a lot to say hello, so
Hi,
he's
Lisa.
coming. Um,
Hi, Marco.
Hey,
Hi, Marco.
these are two new people. This is Craig and Adrian.
Hi,
hey,
Marco.
hey, welcome aboard. Welcome.
Marco has a really good friend named Adrian too, so you'll be,
Cool.
and you already love Kreger, so I'm sure I'm sure you can remember Craig's name too.
I go like, hey, I'm big egg can go, okay?
Yeah, so we better go ahead and wrap it up since we're at the end, but so that I wonder if we should continue this topic or something in a similar vein next time, where we've kind of put off the topic of talking about immigration, which we want to talk about soon. But what do y'all think? Do you want to continue this discussion some next week or move on to a new topic? I'll take votes. Yes, talk about it next week.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing, Carol. I mean, because I know more now than I did when I got here. Because this isn't something that people typically talk about. And so I feel a little bit more educated. And I keep thinking about that scripture where Jesus said, when you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. And at one point in our lives, we have all been a least of these. I'm sure everyone in this room has at one point been a least of these. And so thank you for bringing up the topic. And if you want to, if we want to continue this next week, I'm good with that. Immigration.
Why don't we
I might
expand
need.
it a little bit and talk not just about neurodivergence, but let's add in things like developmental disabilities and I don't know, I'm going to be in Lubbock with my mom. Maybe we should talk about dementia too. Let's talk about all kinds of cognitive let's talk about cognitive disabilities, and we can kind of include a little bit about neurodivergence in there, but I think we've covered that topic fairly well, but that can be included in our discussion next week. How does that sound? Suzette?
good.
So wanting to be that hand of, we want you to come back, and hoping that this turns into something of a place where you feel safe, and that you feel like that you're in a room full of friends and you're having this conversation about something that you may not really think about. And I think that's part of the greatness of what we're doing here, is exposing us to things maybe we don't think about so much, or it's uncomfortable to think about, or but it also gave me an opportunity to know you on a deeper level. So now I know you both as who you are, with what you're doing, your actions in the church and how you're participating. And now I can say hi to you and you'll know who I am. And I feel like I have a relationship with you. And so I hope you'll come back and, make this a bigger conversation next time. We do usually have a few more people, but it's just a lot going on right now. So, and Carol is amazing. So we are blessed to have Carol. She is newly ordaining with the MCC church. She just went through her ordination test, I guess is what it was called, or
I had an ordination interview
okay.
where I was affirmed.
We're trying to get her ordained. So
it won't be long. It won't be long.
yeah. And you know, she's a great part of this global outreach that we can have. And you know, for
Part
those
of the reason that I was so ready to come back to Resurrection, I had been a member in the like 1988 to 92, anyway, but was the online church, and it just I mean, a lot of churches have online services, but thanks to Suzette, we have an online church, and there are so many wonderful opportunities. So I'm just really grateful, and I just love Resurrection, and the inclusion is a big piece of that for me. Is a big piece. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy that y'all were here, and I hope that we see you again.
Oh, and one thing I would add, Craig and Adrian, is that, you know, there are other, like Wednesday nights, there's a book club. And typically the book we're doing right now is The False White Gospel. So usually if you want to keep up, you've got to read a couple, 2 or 3 chapters if you want to if you're in the book club. You don't have to, but you can. And then we have a prayer group every day at 12 noon. If you're ever, like, I take my lunch period and I come to prayer group at Resurrection. So my slogan for God Talk is like, the only thing you need to come to God Talk is a mouth and an opinion. That's all you need for this right here. You just need a mouth and an opinion, because we've all got that. So welcome aboard.
All right.
And the computer can connect to Zoom.
I was talking to Suzette about some computer problems before anybody else got on, so I understand. That's frustrating. All right, Kreger, would you be willing to close this out in prayer?
Absolutely. Holy God, we're just grateful for another evening of God Talk, where we are free to gather and just think about things that we don't think about all the time, talk about stuff that we may not be aware of. And we're so thankful tonight that Carol has opened up and been expressed some vulnerability and shared with us things that we may not have known about ADHD and autism and other things. And so we're just grateful for that. We're grateful for Craig and Adrian coming tonight for the first time. And we hope that they come back, and absolutely want to make them feel welcome here. This is a safe space. And as we go through the rest of this week, we just ask for your reminders to be graceful, to worry about the least of these, to reach out and help someone, that when we see the least of these in any way, that we can take an action step, maybe, you know, to help out, or to do something kind and do something good. Keep us in the good graces of your son, Jesus. And it's in his name that we pray tonight. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you
Have a
next
wonderful
week.
week. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.